The morning sun poured golden light across the rolling vineyards of Napa Valley, casting long, lazy shadows over the elegant resort where Olivia Bennet and her husband Daniel were celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. The air was rich with the scent of grapes and early autumn leaves, and the distant hum of winery activity mingled with the soft jazz playing in the background. To any observer, they were a flawless couple, smiling gracefully for photos, exchanging tender glances, and exchanging jokes that carried just the right amount of familiarity. Friends commented on the sparkle in Olivia's eyes, the effortless charm of Daniel's laughter. They seemed untouchable, a perfect pair carved from a glossy magazine. Yet beneath that polished exterior, Olivia felt a subtle, nagging unease. She noticed the way Daniel's smile faltered ever so slightly when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he lingered over phone notifications with a distracted gaze. She remembered the nights they spent at home in New York, when he would return from work, exhausted yet restless, retreating into his study with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Now, in this idyllic setting, the distance persisted, more palpable than ever. Small gestures, the way he sipped his wine without meeting her eyes, the brief hesitation before taking her hand, left her stomach twisting in unfamiliar knots. Despite these feelings, Olivia pushed herself to enjoy the celebration. She had spent weeks planning this trip, choosing the vineyard with the perfect view, arranging a private dinner overlooking the sun-drenched hills, ensuring the resort staff knew every preference. She wanted this weekend to be a testament to their life together, a shimmering reflection of 2 decades filled with love, compromise, and shared ambition. Daniel, as always, played his part flawlessly, charming the staff, complimenting the scenery, and raising his glass with practiced warmth. To the outside world, nothing could be amiss. As the day moved toward evening, the resort transformed. Lanterns were lit along the winding paths, casting warm halos over the cobblestone, and the scent of roasted herbs drifted from the kitchen. Olivia and Daniel strolled through the vineyards, hand in hand, their conversation light yet precise, carefully avoiding the topics that might reveal underlying tension. She noticed a shadow cross his expression as he paused to examine a vine, and she felt a pang of something she could not name. Doubt, fear, or perhaps a memory she had buried long ago. Every laugh and compliment between them carried a subtle undertone of vigilance, a delicate performance rehearsed over 20 years. Later, as they sat down for dinner at a table adorned with candles and crystal, Olivia watched Daniel carefully. The flickering candlelight highlighted the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threads beginning to show at his temples. She felt the familiar ache of knowing someone intimately, yet sensing layers of them forever hidden. Her own smile, for all its warmth, concealed a storm of thoughts she refused to voice. She wondered if the perfect couple she had spent her life building was simply a mirage, a beautiful illusion floating over truths she was only beginning to sense. By the time the final toast of the evening came, with glasses raised high and friends cheering around them, Olivia's thoughts swirled in quiet unrest. Daniel smiled at her, the kind of smile he reserved for these ceremonial moments, the kind that told her he was present, attentive, and devoted. And yet, in the deepest corners of her mind, a shadow whispered a warning. Appearances can deceive. And even in the golden light of Napa, shadows lingered where she least expected them. The morning after the anniversary celebration was quieter than Olivia had anticipated. She lingered in the suite, watching sunlight streak across the polished wooden floor, feeling an unusual weight pressing against her chest. It was then, as she passed by the sitting room, that she heard Daniel's voice, unusually low, carrying the cadence of secrecy. "I don't know if she suspects anything," Daniel was saying. "I can handle it. Just make sure she doesn't see the numbers yet." The voice on the other end, younger, soft but firm, answered with a subtle confidence. Olivia froze, the coffee cup slipping slightly in her hands. Her mind scrambled to piece together the fragments of conversation she had no right to hear, yet could not ignore. Numbers, suspicions, something hidden that she had not been told. For hours, she wandered through the suite, replaying the words, attempting to rationalize them. Perhaps it was business. Daniel's investments were often complex, opaque even to her, yet a gnawing feeling persisted, twisting with every memory of late-night calls, fleeting messages, and moments when Daniel seemed present in body but absent in thought. Olivia knew the sensation well, the subtle intrusion of doubt, like a shadow creeping along the edges of something that had once been warm and certain. When Daniel returned, he greeted her with his usual charm, yet she noticed the fleeting flicker in his eyes as he approached. They shared breakfast, a carefully constructed ritual of smiles, toast, and muted conversation. The sounds of the bustling resort filtered through the windows, cheerful and oblivious to the quiet fracture growing within their relationship. Olivia found herself laughing at moments she barely felt, nodding at stories she only half listened to, all the while cataloging every hesitation, every pause, every carefully measured word. Later, while walking along the terrace overlooking the vineyards, Olivia tried to confront the swirl of emotions that had taken root. She reminded herself of the years they had shared, the laughter and tears, the decisions made together, the children they had raised. Yet the memory of the conversation lingered, a haunting refrain. Every interaction with Daniel suddenly carried double meaning, a gesture too quick, a glance too fleeting. She questioned her judgment, her ability to see him as he truly was. The image of the perfect husband, the man she had known and loved, was beginning to blur, replaced by something more uncertain, more dangerous. Evenings at the resort were meant to be filled with music, wine, and laughter among friends. Olivia joined in, masking the turmoil inside her. Her social mask was impeccable. The smiles and easy conversation veiled the storm she felt. Yet beneath the surface, doubt had taken root, spreading quietly into every thought, every memory, every plan. She began to understand that the anniversary celebration, no matter how lavish, could not erase the shadow she now carried, the whisper of betrayal that refused to be silenced. By the end of the day, Olivia found herself alone on the terrace again, leaning against the railing as the sunset painted the hills in shades of fire and rose. Daniel's laughter floated from inside the resort, carefree and seemingly innocent. Yet Olivia could no longer hear it without suspicion. A knot of apprehension tightened in her chest. She realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that the life she thought she knew might have been only a carefully curated illusion. And if that illusion was breaking, she had no choice but to follow the fracture wherever it might lead. Olivia had always prided herself on her intuition, the subtle ability to sense when something was amiss. But nothing could have prepared her for the discovery that awaited her in Daniel's study that afternoon. She had lingered outside the door, ostensibly retrieving a forgotten notebook, when a folder on his desk caught her attention. A plain, unassuming folder, its edges slightly worn. Curiosity, mingled with dread, compelled her to open it. Inside were printed emails and text messages, meticulously archived and dated. The correspondence was between Daniel and a woman she had never met, a colleague from his firm, whose name now rang like a bell she could not unhear. Emily. The exchanges began innocuously enough, professional in tone, but the undertone of flirtation became unmistakable over time. Compliments on appearance, late-night confessions of loneliness, hints of meetings just for discussion, all written with a casual intimacy that made Olivia's stomach churn. Her eyes blurred with tears as she scrolled through financial documents linked to the same messages. Unauthorized transactions, unexplained withdrawals, investments she had never authorized, yet which were tied to accounts she assumed Daniel managed responsibly. The numbers were staggering, a betrayal not just of love, but of trust, security, and shared life. The careful scaffolding of their 20-year marriage now seemed fragile, exposed under the weight of deception. For a long while, Olivia sat there in silence, the study around her quiet, but somehow charged, as though the walls themselves held the secret. She imagined confronting Daniel, imagining the defense he would offer, the rationalizations he might employ, and yet, a part of her recoiled from the confrontation, fearing that her own composure might crumble under the weight of his charm and the years of habit that had trained her to forgive. She understood, with a cold clarity, that this was no longer merely about infidelity in the abstract. It was about the integrity of her own life, about the boundaries she had allowed to be crossed, about the person she might become if she let this betrayal dictate her choices. The hours passed in a blur of contemplation and self-questioning. Olivia recalled moments of Daniel's absences, The lingering glances at his phone, the way he sometimes seemed elsewhere, even during conversations meant to be intimate. Every memory now bore a new weight, every smile and gesture reinterpreted under the shadow of deceit. She felt a quiet, simmering anger, both at him and at herself, for not recognizing the signs sooner. As evening descended over Napa, casting the vineyard in a muted palette of violet and gold, Olivia made a decision. She would not act impulsively. She would observe, document, and understand the full scope of what had been hidden from her. Knowledge, she realized, was the first step toward reclaiming power. She returned to her room, the folder tucked under her arm like a talisman of truth. Her mind a storm of conflicting emotions, love and betrayal, hurt and resolve, disbelief and awakening. In the darkness of her suite, Olivia stared out at the illuminated vines, the lights flickering like tiny sentinels, and whispered to herself that the next confrontation, whenever it came, would not find her unprepared. She had crossed the threshold into a world she had feared existed, and there was no turning back. The celebration, the perfection, the outward charm of their marriage, all of it now seemed like a fragile mask, ready to fall at the slightest tremor. Olivia sat in the quiet of her room, the folder of Daniel's correspondence resting heavily on the desk beside her. The evening light cast long shadows across the walls, shadows that seemed to stretch and bend with the contours of her thoughts. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to drift back to the beginning of their story, to the early days when love had been incandescent, untainted by doubt or betrayal. She remembered the first time she had seen him in a small cafe in Brooklyn, the effortless way he had smiled, the subtle charm that made the room seem smaller, more intimate, and entirely theirs. Their initial conversations had been filled with laughter, ideas, and dreams so vivid they had painted the future in impossibly bright colors. Every touch, every glance, every whispered promise had seemed to confirm that they were meant to navigate life together. It was a time when trust was unquestioned, when passion could exist without the shadow of fear, and when honesty was as natural as breathing. But the present was different. Now, even the smallest interactions carried weight and suspicion. Daniel's casual touches seemed measured, rehearsed. His laughter occasionally felt hollow, lacking the genuine warmth she remembered. A simple glance could evoke a multitude of meanings, each one twisting deeper into uncertainty. She thought of the dinners where he seemed absorbed by something invisible, the fleeting moments when he would check his phone or step away for no discernible reason. The intimacy that once defined their marriage was now layered with tension, a fragile dance where each gesture might be a truth or a deception. Earlier that day, Olivia had encountered someone unexpected. Clara, one of Daniel's colleagues, who had stopped by the resort ostensibly to discuss a charity project. Her presence, casual yet knowing, had ignited a subtle unease. There were smiles exchanged, words shared with a familiarity Olivia could not name, and a lingering sense that more existed beneath the surface. Clara's eyes had a glint that spoke of secrets unspoken, and Olivia could not shake the feeling that she had inadvertently glimpsed the perimeter of Daniel's hidden life. Olivia reflected on the choices she had made over the years, the compromises, the silent agreements, the moments she had set aside her own desires for the sake of harmony. She wondered if those decisions had unwittingly created a space where deception could take root, a space she had ignored because love had blinded her to the subtle erosion of trust. Each memory of happiness now carried a dual edge, mingling nostalgia with the sharp sting of suspicion. She realized that the marriage she had meticulously built was as delicate as glass, and that love alone could not repair fractures left unattended. In the solitude of her suite, Olivia's mind wandered between past and present, between what had been and what was emerging. She understood that the man she loved, the man she had trusted for 20 years, was not entirely the man she now knew. Yet, she also recognized the complexity of human desire, the contradictions of loyalty and temptation, and the fine line between forgiveness and self-preservation. The vineyard outside, bathed in twilight, seemed to reflect her thoughts, serene on the surface, but teeming with roots and shadows beneath. By the time night settled fully over Napa Valley, Olivia had reached a fragile understanding. She could no longer approach Daniel with blind faith, nor could she dismiss the unease gnawing at her. To navigate what lay ahead, she would need to balance the memory of their love with the reality of his deception, to observe closely, and to prepare herself for truths yet uncovered. In the quiet, illuminated by a single lamp on the desk, she made a silent vow. She would face whatever came next with eyes wide open, fully aware that the illusions of intimacy were slipping and that the coming days would demand every ounce of her courage and clarity. The day Olivia had been dreading finally arrived. She found Daniel in the study, the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the floor and over the papers that had haunted her for days. She closed the door quietly behind her, a subtle finality in the gesture, and faced him with the folder of emails and documents clutched tightly in her hand. "I need to know the truth, Daniel," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "Everything I've seen, the messages, the accounts. Tell me what's happening." Daniel looked up, his expression carefully neutral, as though he had been expecting this moment, rehearsing it countless times in private. "Olivia, you don't understand," he began, his tone measured. "It's complicated. You have to see the bigger picture. This isn't about betrayal. It's about strategy, about planning for the future." Her hands shook slightly as she placed the folder on the desk. "Strategy? Deception? You think lying to me for years counts as planning for the future?" The words tasted bitter on her tongue, yet they were tempered by a lingering restraint. For 20 years, she had known Daniel, loved him, trusted him implicitly. Now, the familiarity felt like a trap, and every word he spoke was a challenge to the core of her identity. Daniel sighed, a deep, controlled sound, as though he bore some unspoken burden. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way. I tried to protect you, protect us. Some things you can't understand unless you're in my position." Olivia's chest tightened. Every attempt at justification, every evasion, only fueled the fire in her. "Protect me? You think secrecy and lies are protection? Look at what we have now. Do you even see it, Daniel? The trust, the intimacy, the love we've built gone. And for what?" Their conversation escalated, the calm veneer of the study shattering with every exchanged accusation. Voices that had once carried laughter and comfort now reverberated with anger and hurt. Daniel attempted to explain, to rationalize, to plead for understanding, while Olivia countered with a precision born of weeks of observation and reflection. Outside, the distant hum of the resort continued, oblivious to the storm within these walls, the world moving on as their private universe fractured in real time. Yet even amid the confrontation, moments of hesitation betrayed the complexity of their bond. Daniel's eyes, for all their deflection, softened briefly when he saw her hurt, the same eyes that had once made her heart leap. Olivia felt a twinge of the old affection, a painful reminder of why she had loved him, even as fury coursed through her veins. She understood then that love and anger could coexist in a way that was both devastating and illuminating. By the time the argument reached its natural pause, the room was heavy with silence, punctuated only by the shallow breaths of two people who had known each other intimately, yet now seemed like strangers. Olivia stepped back, her resolve hardening. She realized that this confrontation, while necessary, was only the beginning. The life they had carefully curated was unraveling, and she would need every ounce of clarity and strength to navigate the consequences of truth. As she left the study, leaving Daniel staring at the scattered papers, Olivia felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The facade of perfection could no longer shield them. The consequences of betrayal, both emotional and moral, were now unavoidable, and she knew, deep down, that the choices she would make in the coming days would define not only their marriage but the woman she would become. The following morning, Olivia could hardly bear to sleep. Her thoughts spiraled around the confrontation from the previous day, around Daniel's evasions, and around the gnawing suspicion that their marriage had been built on half-truths for much longer than she imagined. Determined to uncover the full scope of his deception, she returned to the study, her hands steady despite the storm inside her. She opened another drawer she had avoided before, a small, nondescript compartment that had somehow gone unnoticed. Inside lay documents that made her stomach tighten, an intricate web of financial activity she could barely comprehend. Unauthorized investments, secret offshore accounts, Transfers of sums she could scarcely quantify, all coordinated under Daniel's meticulous care. The depth and sophistication of the schemes made it clear that this was not a mere lapse in judgment or a fleeting indiscretion. It was a calculated pattern of manipulation, one that had quietly undermined the stability of her life. Shocked, Olivia sank into the chair, her mind racing. She thought of their home, their savings, the life she had believed was secure. How much of it had been genuine, and how much a carefully constructed illusion? As the weight of betrayal settled over her, she felt a mingling of anger and humiliation, an almost physical ache. The realization that Daniel had maintained a double life not only emotionally but financially stirred a turbulent cocktail of emotions. Rage, sorrow, disbelief, and fear collided in a way that left her feeling both empowered and vulnerable. Her thoughts turned to morality and justice. Could she forgive such a profound breach? Could she maintain composure in the face of this duplicity? Every memory of Daniel's charm, his gentle touches, the years they had spent building a life together, now clashed with evidence of his manipulation. Each smile and each affectionate gesture was recontextualized. Nothing seemed authentic anymore. The man she had trusted implicitly had become an enigma, a figure whose true intentions were buried beneath layers of secrecy. Yet within the shock, Olivia found a clarity she had not anticipated. She understood that she could not remain passive, that the life she wanted, a life of dignity and self-respect, demanded action. The stakes were immense. Her financial security, her emotional stability, her very sense of identity. And while the anger burned, it was tempered by resolve. She would not allow this betrayal to dictate the remainder of her life. By late afternoon, Olivia had begun to outline a plan. Not impulsive revenge, not reckless confrontation, but a calculated, deliberate response. Knowledge, she realized, was power. She had glimpsed the shadow of Daniel's world, and now it was her turn to navigate it with precision. Every hidden transaction, every secret message, every fragment of deception became part of a map she would use to reclaim control. The serenity of Napa Valley, the vineyards stretching endlessly beyond the windows, seemed to mock the turbulence within her. And yet, amidst the quiet beauty, Olivia felt the stirrings of empowerment, the first faint signals of reclaiming agency over a life Daniel had tried to manipulate. As evening descended, she remained at the study desk. Papers and correspondence spread around her like a battlefield, her mind both exhausted and alight with strategy. She knew the confrontation was only the beginning, that the consequences of revelation would ripple through every aspect of their lives. But for the first time since the discovery of Daniel's duplicity, Olivia felt a measure of control returning, a sense that she would face the coming storm not as a victim, but as an architect of her own destiny. Olivia spent the morning in quiet contemplation, the golden Napa sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating every detail of the suite, as if exposing truths she had previously overlooked. The confrontation, the discoveries, and the mounting sense of betrayal had left her emotionally raw, yet clarity was beginning to take shape. She realized that indecision was a luxury she could no longer afford. The life she had once shared with Daniel demanded decisive action, and she alone would determine the path forward. Friends and family, well-meaning yet cautious, offered advice in hushed tones over calls and messages. Some urged patience, others suggested legal counsel, while a few implied she should consider walking away entirely. Every suggestion, even the kindest, carried weight, and yet also underscored the complexity of her predicament. Each option seemed fraught with consequence. Confrontation might inflame anger and cause irreparable damage. Revenge could bring temporary satisfaction. But moral ambiguity, retreat might preserve dignity yet feel like surrender. Olivia weighed each path, the tension in her chest coiling like a spring, ready to release. Daniel, sensing the shift, attempted reconciliation. He approached her that evening, hands extended, eyes filled with a mix of vulnerability and insistence. "Olivia, please," he said softly. "I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. I love you. We can fix it, together." Olivia studied his expression, searching for authenticity amid the familiarity that had once been comforting. She remembered the years of affection, the shared dreams, the quiet mornings and laughter-filled evenings. And yet, beneath the surface of his words, she saw the layers of deception, the calculated omissions, the breaches of trust that could not be erased with simple apologies. Love alone, she understood, was not enough to repair a foundation so thoroughly fractured. As night fell, she walked alone along the terrace, the vineyards bathed in the soft glow of lanterns and fading sunlight. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and ripening grapes. Olivia's mind raced, considering the legal, financial, and social ramifications of every choice. Each scenario played out vividly in her imagination. Courtroom battles, public scrutiny, private confrontations. She realized that her life could no longer be dictated by the illusions of the past. The control she had relinquished over the years must be reclaimed. In the quiet, Olivia found a hard-edged resolve. She would act, not impulsively, but strategically. She would confront the deception, protect her interests, and assert her autonomy without losing the integrity that defined her. Daniel's attempts at reconciliation would not deter her. Instead, they would be evaluated against the concrete evidence she had collected, against the reality of his actions rather than the charm of his words. She would not allow sentimentality to override judgment. By the time she returned to her suite, Olivia had formulated a plan, a deliberate course of action designed to navigate the coming confrontation with clarity and control. She would gather her evidence, consult selectively with trusted advisors, and face Daniel on her terms. There would be no blind forgiveness, no surrender to charm or guilt, only the assertion of agency and the careful reclamation of her life. For the first time since the initial discovery of betrayal, she felt the quiet stirrings of empowerment. She understood that the days ahead would test her resolve, but she also knew that she would emerge not as a victim, but as the architect of her own destiny. The morning sun broke through the mist over Napa Valley, illuminating the vineyards with a soft, golden hue. Olivia stood by the terrace, the folder of evidence securely in her possession, feeling a calm she had not experienced since the first hints of betrayal had pierced her life. The confrontation, the revelations, the sleepless nights, all of it had led to this moment. She understood that clarity, once achieved, demanded action, and she was ready. Daniel entered the suite, his posture tense yet cautiously hopeful. "Olivia," he began, voice measured. "We need to talk. Please. Just hear me out." Olivia met his gaze, steady and unflinching. The anger that had surged through her in the previous weeks had softened into a resolute clarity. "Daniel, I've heard enough. I've seen everything. There's nothing more to explain, and there's nothing left for us to salvage in the way it once was." Shock registered on his face, a flicker of disbelief that quickly turned to desperation. "We can fix this," he pleaded. "No," Olivia interrupted, her tone firm but calm. "Fixing it is not what I need. What I need is truth, boundaries, and my own life back. You've made your choices, and now you face the consequences." Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of recognition settling over him. For the first time, the charming deflections and rehearsed excuses failed to protect him. He understood, in that instant, that the life he had taken for granted, the trust, the love, the security, was irretrievably altered. Olivia moved with purpose, calling her legal advisor to ensure her rights and financial security were protected. She had already consulted with close friends and family, aligning support with strategy, but beyond legal matters, her focus was internal, reclaiming autonomy, reaffirming her self-worth, and severing the psychological chains Daniel's duplicity had wrought. She felt a rising clarity, a sense of empowerment rooted not in revenge, but in control over her own destiny. By midday, Daniel had left, a quiet acknowledgement of failure hanging between them, unspoken but undeniable. Olivia walked the vineyards, the cool breeze brushing against her face, carrying with it a profound sense of liberation. She thought about the years they had shared, the joy, the love, the illusions, and she allowed herself a small, bittersweet smile. She mourned what had been lost, yes, but she also celebrated what she had regained. Her agency, her dignity, her clarity. The afternoon light shifted across the hills, and Olivia felt the first true sense of peace in weeks. She understood the limits of forgiveness, the boundaries of love, and the necessity of self-preservation. She was no longer defined by the betrayals of another, but by the choices she made in response. For the first time, she felt fully awake, fully aware, and fully herself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vineyard in hues of amber and rose, Olivia knew that the journey ahead would not be without challenges, but it was hers to navigate. And in that realization, she discovered hope, a quiet, enduring hope for authentic happiness, free from illusions and empowered by truth.